Something new. Yeah, I'm not wearing a wig, but I have a new idea. I see my wig's up there. Let's like move this over here this way a little bit so it'll be easier for me. I have a new idea, and I have this book. It's called Sons of Fortune. It's written by Jeffrey Archer. It is, I think it is classified as fiction, and it has received praise from Entertainment Weekly, Time Magazine, the Boston Globe, the New York Times, the Washington Post. This is, I guess, Jeffrey Archer is a #1 New York Times bestselling author. And this book, which sells for $38.95 in Canada and $27.95. This is a hardbound book. Was published in it's New York by St. Martin's Press in copyright 2003. Okay, so we're going to read this. I found this book and a free book drop thing at a park. They have these free book drops at a park, and I thought, wow, this is so cool. I want to read this. And I thought, not many people do reading on YouTube, and I've been like really one of the reasons I was hoping to also get involved at the library was to get into a book reading club. I loved being an English major in college. I mean, sometimes I regretted that I didn't major in librarian, but I ended up being an English teacher. But the joy that I had in college was talking about books and stories and other writers. I loved that. I loved it in high school, and I loved it in college, and I still love it. So we're gonna read this book by Jeffrey Archer, Sons of Fortune. Let's start with we're gonna start with Book 1, Genesis. Chapter 1. Here we go. Now, I won't be looking up at you, so you're just going to be watching me read, and hopefully I have a good reading voice. Susan plunked the ice cream firmly on Michael Cartwright's head. It was the first occasion the two of them had met, or that was what Michael's best man claimed when Susan and Michael were married 21 years later. Both of them were 3 years old at the time, and when Michael burst into tears, Susan's mother rushed over to find out what the problem was. All Susan was willing to say on the subject, and she repeated it several times, was, "Well, he asked for it, didn't he?" Susan ended up with a spanking, not the ideal start for any romance. The next recorded meeting, according to the best man, was when they both arrived at their elementary school. Susan declared with a knowing air that Michael was a crybaby and, what's more, a sneak. Michael told the other boys that he would share his graham crackers with anyone who was willing to pull Susan Illingworth's pigtails. Few boys tried a second time. At the end of their first year, Susan and Michael were jointly awarded the class prize. Their teacher considered it the best course of action if she hoped to prevent another ice cream incident. Susan told her friends that Michael's mother did his homework for him, to which Michael responded that at least it was in his own handwriting. The rivalry continued unabated through junior and senior high until they departed for different universities, Michael to Connecticut State and Susan to Georgetown. For the next 4 years, they both worked hard at avoiding each other. In fact, the next occasion their paths crossed was, ironically, at Susan's home when her parents threw a surprise graduation party for their daughter. The biggest surprise was not that Michael accepted the invitation, but that he turned up. Susan didn't recognize her old rival immediately, partly because he had grown 4 inches and was, for the first time, taller than her. It wasn't until she offered him a glass of wine, and Michael remarked, "At least this time you didn't pour it all over me," that she realized who the tall, handsome man was. "God, I behaved dreadfully, didn't I?" said Susan, wanting him to deny it. "Yes, you did," he said, "but then I expect I deserved it." "You did," she said, biting her tongue. They chatted like old friends, and Susan was surprised at how disappointed she felt when a classmate from Georgetown joined them and started flirting with Michael. They didn't speak to each other again after that evening. Michael phoned the following day and invited her to see Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn in Adam's Rib. Susan had already seen the movie, but still heard herself accepting and couldn't believe how long she spent trying on different dresses before he arrived for that first date. Susan enjoyed the film, even though it was her second time, and wondered if Michael would put an arm around her shoulder when Spencer Tracy kissed Katharine Hepburn. He didn't. But when they left the movie house, he took her hand as they crossed the road and didn't let it go until they reached the coffee shop. That was when they had their first disagreement. Michael admitted that he was going to vote for Thomas Dewey in November, while Susan made it clear that she wanted the incumbent Democrat, Harry Truman, to remain in the White House. The waiter placed the ice cream in front of Susan. She stared down at it. "Don't even think about it," Michael said. Susan wasn't surprised when he called the following day, although she had been sitting by the phone for over an hour pretending to be reading. Michael admitted to his mother over breakfast that morning it had been love at first sight. "But you've known Susan for years," remarked his mother. "No, I haven't, Mom," he replied. "I met her for the first time yesterday." Both set of parents were delighted, but not surprised when they became engaged a year later. After all, they had hardly spent a day apart since Susan's graduation party. Both had landed jobs within days of leaving college, Michael as a trainee with the Hartford Life Insurance Company, and Susan as a history teacher at Jefferson High. So they decided to get married during the summer vacation. What they hadn't planned was that Susan would become pregnant while they were on their honeymoon. Michael couldn't hide his delight at the thought of being a father, and when Dr. Greenwood told them in the 6th month that it was going to be twins, he was doubly delighted. "Well, at least that will solve one problem," was his first reaction. "Namely," asked Susan, "one can be a Republican and the other a Democrat." "Not if I have anything to do with it," said Susan, rubbing her stomach. Susan continued teaching until her 8th month, which happily coincided with the Easter vacation. She arrived at the hospital on the 28th day of the 9th month carrying a small suitcase. Michael left work early and joined her a few minutes later with the news that he had been promoted to account executive. "What does that mean?" asked Susan. "It's a fancy title for an insurance salesman," Michael told her. "But it does include a small pay raise, which can only help now. We're going to have two more mouths to feed." Once Susan was settled in her room, Dr. Greenwood suggested to Michael that he wait outside during the delivery, as with twins there just might be complications. Michael paced up and down the long corridor. Whenever he reached the portrait of Josiah Preston hanging on the far wall, he turned and retraced his steps. On the first few of these route marches, Michael didn't stop to read the long biography printed below the portrait of the hospital's founder. By the time the doctor emerged through the double doors, Michael knew the man's entire life history by heart. The green clad figure walked slowly toward him before removing his mask. Michael tried to fathom the expression on his face. In his profession, it was an advantage to be able to decipher expressions and second guess thoughts, because when it came to selling life insurance, you needed to anticipate any anxieties a potential client might have. However, when it came to this life insurance policy, the doctor gave nothing away. When they came face to face, he smiled and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Cartwright. You have two healthy sons." Susan had delivered two boys, Nat at 4:37 and Peter at 4:43 that afternoon. For the next hour, the parents took turns cuddling them until Dr. Greenwood suggested that perhaps mother and baby should be allowed to rest. "Having to feed two children will prove exhausting enough. I shall put them both in the special care nursery overnight," he added. "Nothing to worry about because it's something we always do with twins." Michael accomplished his Michael accompanied his two sons to the nursery, where once again he was asked to wait in the corridor. The proud father pressed his nose up against the pane of glass and divided the corridor from the row of cribs, gazing at the boys as they lay sleeping, wanting to tell everyone who passed, "They're both mine." He smiled at the nurse who was standing by their side, keeping a watchful eye over the latest arrivals. She was placing name tags around their tiny wrists. Michael couldn't remember how long he remained there before eventually returning to his wife's bedside. When he opened the door, he was pleased to find that Susan was fast asleep. He kissed her gently on the forehead. "I'll see you in the morning, honey, just before I go to work," ignoring the fact that she couldn't hear a word. Michael left her, walked down the corridor, and stepped into the elevator to find Dr. Greenwood had exchanged his green scrubs for a sports jacket and gray flannels. "I wish they were all that easy," he told the proud father as the elevator stopped on the ground floor. "Still, I'll drop by this evening, Mr. Cartwright, to check on your wife and see how the twins are doing. Not that I anticipate any problems." "Thank you, doctor," said Michael. "Thank you." Dr. Greenwood smiled and would have left the hospital and driven home had he not spotted an elegant lady coming through the swing doors. He walked quickly across to join Ruth Davenport. Michael Cartwright glanced back to see the doctor holding open the elevator doors for two women, one heavily pregnant. An anxious look had replaced Dr. Greenwood's warm smile. Michael only hoped that the doctor's latest charge would have as an uncomplicated a birth as Susan had managed. He strolled across to his car, trying to think about what needed to be done next, still unable to remove the broad grin from his face. The first thing he must do was phone his grandparents. And then we'll be moving on to chapter 2 in the next video. So we'll just put a bookmark in that page and move on to chapter 2 for my next video. If you are liking my reading, please let me know. This is something new that I'm trying to do, and I'm not sure if it's a good idea or not. But if you want to be part of the book reading group, maybe we could do something like that together here at YouTube. Jeffrey Archer, Sons of Fortune, is what I'm reading. And if you have the book or can get the book and you'd like to read and with me, and we could discuss the books after we read chapters and stuff like that, that would be wonderful. I really would love to do that. If nobody does join, then I'll just be reading chapter by chapter and then, give my thoughts. After a certain point, I'll do like summaries and thoughts and stuff like that. Anyway, I hope you like that. Thanks, and have a good day.